Academia has been a leftist institution for decades now, and that influence now dominates our institutions through woke politics, which radicalizes those working inside them. Initiatives such as critical race theory, the 1619 Project, transgenderism, safe spaces, and more are now front and center in the college experience, and much more have taken a front seat. And our guest today, Dr. Michael Robillard, has witnessed these developments firsthand. Dr. Robillard is a philosopher and writer, previously a research faculty member at Notre Dame, junior research fellow at Oxford's Linacre College, as well as a former resident research fellow at the Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership at the United States Naval Academy. He's also a previous research fellow at the University of Oxford's Yehiro Center for Practical Ethics, and on top of all of his many accomplishments, is an Iraqi war veteran and former Army Ranger. Robillard is author of the upcoming book, Outsourcing Duty, The Moral Exploitation of the American Soldier. He is launching a new writing platform, michaelrobillard.com. Go check that out. We'll link it in the description. And lastly, he has a 2-day men's conference in September sponsored by Christian Veterans United. I will link that info in the description as well. Dr. Robillard, you've done it all. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for that excellent introduction.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Well, we'll jump right in. You recently published a newsletter titled How I Left Academia, or How Academia Left Me. And that's what I want to focus on today, your experience and time in higher ed. You say that when you first began studying philosophy in college, you were in awe of the ideas that you encountered and long admired our higher education system. You left the Army and turned down all these jobs to make your career studying philosophy. You write that the university system has become a little more than an indoctrination center for woke leftist ideology and the antithesis of its original aim and purpose. So talk about this shift that took place in your experience with how academia has veered so far off the tracks. What happened?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I mean, for me, I think it all begins with watching Dead Poet Society sometime when I was in high school and seeing that movie and being intrigued by the idea of the life of mind. And I thought that, you know, the writings of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle were really impactful as an undergrad, that the unexamined life was not worth living. You know, that philosophy began with wonder, and I was absolutely captivated by that, you know, those set of ideas, and I think you know, it's all I wanted to do from the time I was 19 at West Point, and I wanted to be a military officer, and I wanted to study philosophy, and my hope was to get back to the academy to do both at some point. And I think around that time, you did have a blending of various views. You could be exposed to liberal Rawlsian Marxist light views. You could be exposed to more meritocratic, libertarian, Christian conservative, Thomist views. And it, you know, this is late 90s, early 2000s. The undergrad department that I came up in at West Point, I would say it was a fair and pluralistic department. And starting grad school in 2009 or so in Canada at the University of Victoria, you started to see a beginning of this shift towards wokeism, but it was still the more radical things that you mentioned, like intersectionality, transgenderism, critical race theory. These were at the margins of sociology and the lit crit department and anthropology. These weren't the main staple of analytic philosophy, which I came up in.
Right.
And I would say that held off probably until sometime around 2015. And then that's where you see these rather fringe ideas suddenly unite and run roughshod over analytic philosophy and over academia proper at an alarming speed. And but it wasn't, to my mind, it wasn't like that in the late 90s, early 2000s, early 2010s.
Right. Yeah. And you know, something here at Campus Reform, we've been covering this bias and abuse for more than 10 years now, but we've really seen it pick up pace in the last few years, especially as you pointed out. In your newsletter, you write that and I quote, "The cracks in the liberal dam were always there from the very beginning, but I was either too distracted, too busy, too intimidated, too career obsessed, or just too willfully ignorant to truly see, let alone acknowledge them or their ultimate ideological direction of travel. And I think that's a problem many Americans have, this sort of willful ignorance. We've kind of stigmatized college as becoming so necessary and so crucial, but have ignored the fact that the standards of academia have declined so rapidly and so quickly that the same logic is much less applicable today. So what and when was your sort of aha moment that made you realize what was going on and start to, kind of lose hope, if you will?
My aha moment was, I mean, I got my dream job appointment at Oxford at the Hero Center for Practical Ethics, and I was there doing stuff, really, really technical, high level, very abstract thinking in the areas of normative ethics and artificial intelligence. So I was writing stuff about weaponized AI, and that was fine to do, right? That within the purview of that discourse, I was allowed to nerd out as much as I wanted to and get as technical as possible. But then around that same time, all the gender ideology starting to hit the mainstream, and nobody was critiquing it. Particularly the so-called analytic philosophers, right? The so-called first principle armchair. Hey, we just define our terms, we define our concepts, and then we trace what the logical entailments are of that. There were certainly a lot of logical entailments of the gender ideology that people weren't making explicit, and I was just very, very surprised that suddenly that was within the free market of ideas at Oxford, that no holds barred, may the best idea win. Suddenly, this obviously contradictory ideology fraught with contradictions and inconsistencies. Nobody was touching it for fear of reputational damage, fear of lack of grant money, fear of the shame mob. And that's like it's like spring 2017. I think I started to see, oh, wait a second, maybe I'm not on the side of the scrappy underdog anymore.
Right. Yeah. And would you agree that it is the leftist shift that has caused decreased academic standards? And if you would, what do those diminished expectations look like? How are they affecting students as scholars and in adulthood?
Well, I think the original concept of the university, right? We take that from ancient Greece, and we take that from things like Aristotle's Lyceum, where there is a concept of sort of a full, well-rounded person, and they had a nature and a telos, and we try to build them up in various capacities in the area of intellect, physical body, aesthetics, civics, and at least maybe since the 60s, the universities started to become more and more an incubator for activism, as opposed to setting persons up to live a good life, to be competent citizens, to have skills, to have internal resources, to be able to solve their own problems, to go out, get a job, start a business, start a family, and live a good life. Instead, I think what we're seeing right now, and this is stuff that people like James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian and Jordan Peterson have pointed out, we've now inherited essentially the third generation of activist professors since the 60s. And now college, it just seems it's a little more than explaining to students how it is that the foundations of their country, their family, their culture are wrong, that there's some karmic injustice because of that, and they need to take on this rebellious or revolutionary spirit and fix things. And that, not only that, but then furthermore, that they themselves are these aggrieved victims for X, Y, and Z. And then when you send people out into the workforce with that mentality and with a complete absence of resourcefulness, skills, and real world knowledge, of course, they're going to see the world as being this inherently oppressive place with no possibility and warranting whatever extreme radical solutions.
Right, exactly. And It really has corroded academia. We're seeing Shakespeare getting canceled for being racist, and even children's books, Dr. Seuss, those are getting canceled because he's racist or something like that, and it just seems to never end. And it seems like it's coming from these professors and faculty. And you note that leftist academics now make their arguments by means of social pressures, stigmatization, intimidation, group struggle sessions, virtue signaling, and online reputational assassination by labeling their opponents as all the ists in ism, extremist, racist, homophobic, bigot, or worse, rather than actually engaging with their opponent's arguments on their merit. So meritocracy on campus has died, or at least is barely still alive.
It's on life support, I would say. I don't know if it's died, but it's as far as I've been around this ecosystem for a while, and it's not looking good.
Right. And on the flip side, academics who dissent from their leftist peers have been shunned into silence and complicity. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to take a stance that the damage has almost been done, and to reverse course on college campuses could be wishful thinking. Is academia a lost cause? And if so, what's our alternative?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I want to say no. All right. I don't think we're totally at a point where we need to opt out of, society in general and start total parallel institutions from the ground up. I think that there's still some pockets at like a Claremont, a Hillsdale, certain pockets in Notre Dame, maybe certain pockets of Oxford that are putting up a good fight, and that is important, and those folks should be there, and those pockets should be defended and not given up. Alternatively, though, I think if we can't do a drastic course correction within the university systems within the next year or two, then I think I would be amenable and even advocating the idea of just saying, look, if you're a parent, don't send your kid to college. If you're in college, get out, become an entrepreneur, figure out your own study, curriculum, go back to the great works. You're starting to see elements, folks like Peter Boghossian and Tim Gordon, they're trying to start their own alternative platforms. So I think you need maybe a combination of both, right? You do need the starting of new ground up institutions that are grounded in truth and reason and classical principles of Western civilization. But then I think there is still hope at defending and recovering the what the academy used to be. So I don't think people should just totally give up hope just yet.
Well, and that is the dichotomy for parents and students, is that on one hand, we want to save academia and we want to restore it to its former beauty. But on the other hand, they're having to shell out hundreds of thousands of dollars to learn about critical race theory and how horrible, and how horrible their kids are just because they're white. And so how do you reconcile that? What should the decisions vary? How should a student go about deciding if he should go to college at this point?
I guess I would say, do your research, get as many angles as possible. I think having some type of real world job, working with your hands, and knowing and learning what it's like to be under duress and to operate in a leadership capacity and in a followership capacity. I think those are all useful skills prior to going to college. So I almost encourage somebody to take like a year off or something and just go work manual labor, just to get that look, that experiential perspective. Because otherwise, if you're going to college and you don't have that perspective, then there is this seduction to these ideas that everything's, the only reason that guy has something is because he got it unjustly or something, right? It couldn't be in virtue of hard work or principle or whatnot. So I think that could be something that would at least inform somebody before they went off to college. second of all, I guess, yeah, just make sure you have a good founding in or a good foundational knowledge of what the college is about, and make sure it's not one of these far left programs.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think one thing that like you said, the clock is really ticking. We have, you say, 1 to 2 years left, but it's reassuring to know that there's people still out there on the intellectual front lines like you who are pushing back against this. And I think more people need to take on that responsibility to do their homework, to do their research, like you have done, and to point out the flaws and keep pointing out the flaws in the education system so that we can reverse course. We would all love to see academia be what it once was. But with that, Dr. Robillard, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and share your experience inside the halls of academia. Don't forget to go check out Dr. Robillard's book, Outsourcing Duty. Again, the moral exploitation of the American soldier. Dr. Robillard, thank you once again. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.